Good evening and welcome to the Planning Subcommittee meeting. I am Barbara Blake, I'm the chair of this committee. If members can introduce themselves, please, starting with the vice chair.
Reg Rice, vice chair and member for Tottenham Hale.
AjdaOvat, member for Northumberland Park Ward.
Mark White, councillor for Tottenham Central.
Lester Buxton, councillor for Crouch End.
John Bevan, councillor Northumberland Park.
Nicola Bartlett, councillor for West Green.
Councillor Luke Colley Harrison, Crouch End.
George Dunstall, councillor for Stroud Green.
Alex Worrell, councillor for Stroud Green.
Thank you. Could the officers present introduce themselves, please?
Good evening, Matthew Barrett, senior planning lawyer.
Rob Shasovsky, assistant director for planning, building standards and sustainability.
Robbie McKnocker, head of development management and planning enforcement.
James Mead, senior planning officer.
John McRory, major applications team leader.
Richard Truscott, design officer.
Fiona Ray, principal committee coordinator, clerk to the committee.
Thank you. There are some officers who are in attendance virtually and they will introduce themselves when relevant. So we're now on to item 1, which is filming at meetings. This meeting is being recorded. All registered speakers should be aware that they will be recorded for live or subsequent broadcast via the council's internet site or by anyone attending the meeting. And could you please note the rest of the paragraph at item 1, please. Item 2 is the planning protocol. Members and speakers are requested to note the information set out at item 2 on the agenda. Thank you. Item 3 is apologies. We have no apologies have been received, but an apology for lateness from Councillor Brennan. There are no items of urgent business, and we're now on to item 5, declarations of interest. Do members have any declarations of interest? No? Okay, thank you. So we are on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 7th of November 2022. They're pages 1 to 16. Can we approve those minutes, please? Thank you. Could all members please make sure they've switched off their mobile phones as well? Thank you. We will now consider the planning applications. So we're on to item 8. That is Wat Tyler House, Boyton Road, N8 7AU. It's pages 9 to 126. The proposal is set out in the pack, so I won't read that out. The recommendation is to grant, and I'll hand over to the planning officer, James Mead, to introduce this application. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Chair. The site is Wat Tyler House, Boyton Road, and the proposal is for the redevelopment of the car park to the south of Wat Tyler House and the erection of a Part 4, Part 5 and Part 7-storey building, which would contain 15 new council-rented affordable homes. The image on the left-hand side is the site location plan with the site edged in red. And the image on the right-hand side is an aerial image of the photo. You will see that the site is a rectangular shaped plot on the eastern side of Boyton Road and within the Campsbourne estate. The existing site is used as a car park, which contains 24 car parking spaces. These spaces are used by residents of the estate. This is an aerial image taken from the front of the site. On the left-hand side of the site, you will see Wat Tyler House, which is a 7-storey apartment block, and to the right of the site you see Tennyson House, which is a 3-storey building in use as flats. At the bottom of the image and on the opposite side of Boyton Road is Bedale House, which is a 3-storey building used as retirement homes. This is an aerial image taken from the rear of the site. Again, on the right-hand side is Wat Tyler House, and on the left is Tennyson House. At the bottom of the image, you can see 2 other buildings. The right of these is Campsfield House, and on the left is Fleming House. Both these buildings are in use as flats. To the rear of the site, there is a garden area which sits adjacent to Campsfield House. And on the right-hand side of the image, to the rear of Wat Tyler House, is a communal garden area. This is a street scene photo taken from the front of the site. You can see the use of the site as a car park. Again, to the left of the site is Wat Tyler House, and to the right is Tennyson House. These are further street scene images. The one on the left-hand side is taken facing north along Boyton Road, and the one on the right-hand side is taken facing south along Boyton Road. You can see the site between Wat Tyler House and Tennyson House. The scheme forms part of the council's housing delivery programme and proposes the erection of a Part 4, Part 5 and Part 7-storey building. The building would contain 15 council-rented affordable homes. The scheme would also provide bin stores, bike stores, landscaping, lighting and CCTV. There's 2 images there showing some visualisations of the proposed development. You'll see that the scheme is broken up into 3 separate masses with a 5-storey element to the front, a 7-storey central block and a 4-storey element to the rear. The scheme also proposes off-site works on other parts of the estate, including new landscaping, new planting of trees, improvement to existing play spaces, provision of new lighting and provision of new CCTV. These works would mainly take place on the areas identified as B, C and D on the plan on the right-hand side. This is the proposed front elevation. You can see the 5-storey element at the front and the 7-storey central element behind. And this is the proposed rear elevation. You can see the 4-storey rear block and the 7-storey central block. These are the 2 side elevations. The top image is the southern side elevation, and you can clearly see the 3 separate masses that make up the development, with the 5-storey element at the front, the central 7-storey block, and the 4-storey element to the rear. The bottom image is the northern side elevation. These are 2 of the proposed floor plans. The image at the top is the proposed ground floor plan, which you can see there's 2 dwellings provided at ground floor. One of these would be a wheelchair accessible dwelling. You can see in this image that there is a central staircase that provides access to the upper floors. The bike and bin stores are also provided at ground floor level, and they're in the purple colour on that image. The bottom image is a proposed floor plan, and this shows how the dwellings are split up at upper floor levels. Turning to the principle of development, the scheme would provide 15 homes contributing towards the council's housing targets. The scheme would be 100% affordable, addressing local need and need across London for affordable housing. The scheme would make effective use of a brownfield site in an established residential area where residential uses are supported in principle. Overall, officers support the principle of the scheme. This table shows the proposed housing mix. It's proposed to deliver 6 1-bed units, 8 2-bed units and 1 3-bed unit. The constrained size and nature of the site means that the scheme provides mainly 1-bed and 2-bed units. Given this constrained nature of the site, this mix is considered acceptable. The scheme has been through the council's pre-application process. The image on the left-hand side shows the initial pre-application proposal. The image in the centre shows the proposal that was presented to the Quality Review Panel. The response from the Quality Review Panel was broadly positive. However, some design and detailing refinements were suggested by the QRP. The image on the right-hand side shows the final planning application proposal. This is a site plan that shows the footprint of the proposed development. You'll see that the development has been sited to reflect the building lines of neighbouring buildings. The front 5-storey element would match the building line of Tennyson House to the south, whereas the central 7-storey mass reflects the building line of Wat Tyler to the north. This siting and the overall layout of the development is considered acceptable as it respects the urban grain of the immediate locality. In terms of the height and the massing, there are a mixture of building heights in the area. However, buildings are predominantly 2-storey, 3-storey or 4 stories in height. The central image there in the image on the right, so the sort of typical buildings that are seen in the locality. The image on the left-hand side is Wat Tyler House, which is 7 stories in height. The central part of the development would also be 7 stories in height, like Wat Tyler House. However, the modern day requirement for greater floor-to-ceiling heights means that the building extends above the height of Wat Tyler. The projection above Wat Tyler, however, is not significant, and the bulk of the building has been broken up by using different heights across it. Therefore, it's considered that the development sits well in relation to Wat Tyler and the wider area. The proportions of development are considered acceptable. The main material used for the proposed development is brickwork, and this is considered acceptable as this material is characteristic of the area. 3 different types of brickwork are proposed across the development, with yellow stock to the front, red brick for the central block, and a lighter coloured brick to the rear. The use of 3 different bricks helps to break up the appearance of the development. Metal windows and doors are proposed to be incorporated across the development, and these add a contemporary element to the scheme. At ground floor level, it's proposed to construct a wide recessed entrance, which gives a clear frontage to the building. Hit and miss brickwork is also proposed to the side of the entrance, providing a strong visual base to the building. These aspects ensure that development appropriately addresses the street. The site is not within a conservation area. However, there are 4 conservation areas in the proximity of the site. To the west is the Campspawn Cottage Conservation Area. To the north is the Alexandra Palace and Park Conservation Area. To the east is the Hornsey Waterworks Conservation Area. And to the south is the Hornsey High Street Conservation Area. Top photo shows a view from the Campspawn Cottage Conservation Area. From this view, the development would be viewed together with Wat Tyler House, so would not be overly dominant in this setting. Bottom photo shows a view from Alexandra Park. In this view, the development would blend into the backdrop of other buildings. The development would not be highly visible from the other 2 conservation areas. Overall, it's considered that the setting of the nearby conservation areas would be preserved. In terms of neighbour amenity, Wat Tyler House is the building to the north of the site. The 7-storey element would be constructed close to the boundary with Wat Tyler House. However, this element would not project forward at the front wall of Wat Tyler House and would not project beyond the main rear wall of Wat Tyler House. The 4 and 5-storey elements would be set in from the boundary with Wat Tyler House. The overall siting would limit impacts on outlook and open aspects from this neighbouring building. A daylight and sunlight report has been provided with this application, and this concludes that sunlight and overshadowing tests would be passed for Wat Tyler House, and the majority of windows would pass the daylight test. The scheme has been designed to ensure there would not be undue overlooking of Wat Tyler House. To the south of the site is Tennyson House. 5-storey element at the front would be constructed close to the boundary with Tennyson House, however would not project forward of the front wall of this neighbouring building. The other parts of the building would be set in from the boundary and would drop down to 4 stories to the rear. These factors would ensure that there would not be undue impacts on outlook and open aspects. The location of Tennyson House to the south means that material overshadowing would not occur, and the daylight and sunlight report has concluded that the sunlight test has been passed for Tennyson House, and the majority of windows at Tennyson House passed the daylight test. There would be no direct overlooking towards habitable rooms. To the east of the site and to the rear is Campsfield House. The development would be suitably separated from Campsfield House to ensure there would not be undue impacts on outlook or open aspects. The daylight and sunlight tests have been passed for Campsfield House. There would not be any direct overlooking towards the windows and habitable rooms of Campsfield House. To the southeast of the site is 1 and 2 Boyton Close and Fleming House. Again, the development would be suitably separated from these neighbours so to ensure material impacts on outlook and open aspects would not occur. The location of these buildings to the southeast means that overshadowing and loss of sunlight would not be excessive. The majority of windows tested at these neighbouring properties pass the daylight test. The development would incorporate a number of southern-facing windows. However, the fitting of obscure glazing in these windows can ensure that overlooking would not be significant. The scheme has been designed to comply with the London Plan space standards. All of the dwellings provided would have access to open space, outdoor spaces, with the ground floor units having access to garden areas and the upfloor units having access to balconies and terraces. All of the dwellings provided would be dual aspect. There would be some non-compliance with the daylight and sunlight tests for the new units. However, this is mainly due to the provision of balconies above the new windows. If the balconies were removed, daylight and sunlight results would be significantly improved. Officers consider that the provision of outdoor spaces in the balconies is important. Therefore, the provision of these outdoor spaces is considered to outweigh any non-compliance with the daylight and sunlight tests. Therefore, acceptable living conditions and good quality accommodation would be provided. All of the homes would comply with the building regulations for accessible and adaptable dwellings, and one of the ground floor units would comply with building regulations for wheelchair accessible dwellings. Transport assessment has been provided with the application, and this estimates that 117 daily trips would be generated by the development. This level of trips is not considered so significant to result in material impacts on the local highway network or public transport capacity. The scheme would result in the loss of 24 of the existing 24 car parking spaces. The car ownership associated with the development is predicted to be low, and this is mainly because the scheme provides 1 and 2 bed units which do not generally have high car ownership. Parking stress surveys have been provided with the application, and these conclude that sufficient capacity exists on street to accommodate the displaced parking and the parking demands of the new development. Furthermore, the incorporation of sustainable transport initiatives such as high quality cycle parking and a car club would further reduce car ownership and limit impacts on parking availability in local roads. The scheme also proposes the removal of the existing crossover from Boyton Road into the site and the provision of a new blue badge parking bay. This is shown in the pink on the plan on the screen. In terms of sustainability and energy, the scheme would achieve a 76% reduction in carbon emissions, and this would mainly be through energy efficient measures and renewable technologies such as air source heat pumps and photovoltaic panels. A carbon offset requirement would be required. The scheme would pass the overheating requirements. As already mentioned, the scheme includes landscaping works on site and off site. Shrub and hedge planting is proposed on the areas labelled A, so that's the site, the area labelled B, which is the area to the front of Wat Tyler House, the area it's labelled C, which is the communal garden area to the rear of Wat Tyler House, and the area labelled D, which is the play space adjacent to Campsfield House. The planting of new trees is proposed across all these areas, with a net gain of 15 trees in total. The proposed development would incorporate green roofs, contributing to the greening of the area. Overall, the scheme would deliver an urban greening factor of 1.73 on this part of the estate. There would also be a net gain in biodiversity. The scheme doesn't propose any new play space, however, proposes enhancement of the existing play spaces, with new benches, play equipment and lighting to be delivered in the communal garden area to the rear of Wat Tyler House and in the play area to the side of Campsfield House. The image on the right-hand side is an indicative image to show what the play space to the rear of Wat Tyler House could look like. The applicant has worked with the Designing Out Crime Officer, and this constantly has no objection to the scheme. The scheme includes a number of crime mitigation measures on-site and off-site, including new lighting, new CCTV and defensible boundaries. The scheme would also deliver increased passive surveillance, particularly over the alleyway to the rear and the garden areas to the rear. In terms of fire safety, the proposed building would be greater than 18 metres in height and therefore would be a relevant building for fire safety purposes. This means that a fire statement is required. A fire statement has been provided in support of this application, and this makes various recommendations on the construction of the building, the features required to reduce fire risk, and the means of escape and the access for the fire service. These recommendations can be secured via a condition. There has been a recent debate regarding the number of staircases required in taller buildings. The GLA has recently confirmed the position in London, and 2 staircases are required in buildings over 30 metres in height. This building is under 30 metres in height, and therefore 1 staircase is considered acceptable in this instance. The comments from the Health and Safety Executive are noted. However, officers consider that ground floor escape routes are acceptable, and neither the fire brigade or the council's building control have raised any concerns with the development. Therefore, development is considered acceptable in respect of fire safety. To conclude on the scheme, the principle of development is supported by officers. Proposals would make effective use of a brownfield site within an established residential area. The scheme would contribute to the council's housing targets and address the need for affordable housing. The housing mix is considered acceptable, having regard to the constraints of the site. The scheme would equate to a high quality design, which would greatly improve on the appearance of the site. There would be no material harm to neighbour amenity. The scheme also delivers enhanced landscaping and play spaces across the estate. There'd be no material adverse transport or parking impacts. Officers support the sustainability credentials of the development, and development is considered acceptable in respect to fire safety and crime prevention. Officers' recommendation is to grant planning permission subject to conditions and an agreement.
Thank you, James. Thank you. So do the members have any clarification questions for the planning officer? Councillor Ovac.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Just 2 questions relating to transport. At paragraph 6.70 at page 40, it states that sustainable transport initiatives such as Car Club, Travel Plan are incorporated into the scheme and will be secured via condition, but I couldn't find this under the conditions. There was only mention about the cycle storage at page 60, but no mention about the Car Club or Travel Plan under the conditions. And the second part is also, it's mentioned at page 17 that despite the proximity to these forms of public transport, the majority of the site has a public transport accessibility level of 1B, indicating very poor access to public transport. So just querying whether there will be any collaborative work between the council and TfL to ensure better transport accessibility, considering it is a car-free development. Thank you.
In terms of the first query there, I believe that the Car Club and Travel Plan would be secured through the obligations rather than the conditions, so they should be listed in the list of obligations.
Chair, with permission, sorry, normally I'm on screen right here today. So in relation to Petal,
Introduce yourself, please.
sorry, so I'm Murray Switches, I'm the Council Transport Planning Officer. So in relation to Petal is an imperfect tool. It assumes pretty much that after 640 meter bus services doesn't exist, or rail services doesn't exist after 960 meters, where in fact people are willing to walk much further or cycle to a train station. To increase Petal levels, it takes a significant amount of money just to change it by probably half a point. So I think what we'll be seeking to do is increase connectivity by footways improvements, cycling as part of walk and cycle strategy, and through the travel plan to encourage people to cycle to interchanges. But I think to actually try and change the Petal for that site will be impossible almost. But we are working with TfL as part of a larger strategy to look at public transport improvements right across the network.
Thank you, Maurice. Did you want to? No, okay. Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, just can you clarify, will there be kitchens or kitchen diners, or will it be a mixture? And also, can you say something about the water use reduction target that's in the papers? How is that enforced and monitored once the development is built? And I didn't notice anything about satellite dishes not being allowed, unless I've missed it. I might have missed it, but I've looked twice and I can't see that requirement.
So in response to the kitchen and diner query, so it's a mixture of those uses.
Just in terms of the water use condition, so that's enforced by building control. So when this is submitted as a building control application, they'll look at the planning permission and ask what was imposed by planning, and then that will be what they'll enforce through the building regulations approval. And you're correct, yes, we've neglected to attach the standard satellite dishes condition, so I'll make a note to include that in the recommendation.
Councillor Warren.
Thank you. Just looking at point 6.59 about the wheelchair user dwellings. I note that this, it's such a small development, it's justifiable for this not to meet the 10% target. But the papers say there are several sites across the council's housing delivery programme which exceed the 10% figure for wheelchair user dwellings. And I guess I just wondered if you could clarify, are you saying that overall we're kind of well above 10%, or there's at least 10%? And so that, because I think it's important to kind of have a sense of like the mean average, just saying that there are some developments which have higher doesn't necessarily tell you that much. Thanks.
So I don't have the exact figure, the exact percentage, but over the full council's housing delivery programme, it's above 10%. Above 10%.
Right.
Thank you. You did say that all the dwellings were dual aspect, but at the same time, there was no overshadowing. I'm just wondering how you achieved it. Seems to be two opposites there. How you achieve that? And in terms of car parking, it was said that it'd be a car parking free thing. Well, there are people living there now with cars. Does it also apply to them? Because they're familiar with parking the car on site. If there's a new regulation say this must be car-free zone, where are they gonna go when they have always been parking on the same site?
Chair, if I could probably pick up the last point first. There's no intention for this site to be car-free or car-capped. I think the only change is that council tenants normally park off-street within the council car park, and it's expected that they'll park on-street now. So it's a transfer from private parking to on-street parking. There's no parking controls within the area. The applicant has conducted extensive parking surveys over 3 days, and it shows there is capacity on-street to actually accommodate that displacement of parking.
And dual aspect.
Yes, I think the clever thing about this design and how it achieves dual aspect, or at least dual aspect, lots of the flats have triple aspect, without overshadowing any of the neighbours, is it's effectively a sort of 3-cube design. There's a tall cube that's in line with what the existing Watt Tyler block. There's a smaller cube that's in line with the existing Tennyson block, and a slightly smaller cube still, which is sitting at the back, and they're all slightly offset. So they line up with the neighbouring blocks, so they don't overshadow the neighbouring blocks, and they give front and rear and often side aspect as well. If you bring up James, can you bring up the typical floor plan? And I could point it out, I suppose. Windows at the front and windows to the side. This is in line with Watt Tyler. Your windows to the front and windows to the back, and this is sitting at the back. So it's got space all around on 3 sides of it, with windows on each of those 3 sides.
Thank you very much.
Of course, that wasn't covered on the speakers. I hope that doesn't matter.
Thank you, Councillor White.
Thanks, Chair. Just on the 3 small bay windows in Tennyson House that's mentioned in 6.43 in the report. It says that these do not appear to be primary openings that provide notable outlook. Therefore, impacts on these bay windows would not materially affect the living conditions for those residents in Tennyson House. I'm just wondering how we know what those windows are actually used for by those residents, so we can have confidence that what's said in the report is correct.
So we don't know for certain. We don't, amazingly enough, even our housing colleagues don't have internal floor plans of all the council's housing stock. But we do know that those windows are less than 2 meters from the corner of the building. So they, unless their living room, unless their front room, which has a large window facing the street, is a very, very, very shallow room, then it must be also a secondary window to that front room. So that front room has a large window facing the street and a small little projecting bay window. It's quite close to the corner of the building anyway, so it'll still have some outlook, even if it's got a building 2 meters away from it after this is built.
Councillor Buxton.
Thank you, Chair. Just going back on the parking restrictions in that area, because I was under the impression that there was a consultation going on or had been completed about CPZ in the what is it, the east of Hornsey. Has that concluded, or has that been factored in to the plans?
Sure, Chair. So I know there's a consultation going on, but until there's actually they've finished consultation, it's been signed off, there's currently no CPZ in that area. In any event, we are not proposing to car cap or restrict this development. So any resident will be able to apply for a parking permit within any future CPZ scheme. So there's no restriction to those residents.
Thank you, Maurice. Councillor Corley-Harris.
Thanks. Yeah, just wanted to pick up on the HSE's concerns with fire safety. Just wondering whether they had come back to the council's response to that, and whether you could perhaps indicate on the ground floor plan what their interpretation of it was, and then obviously the council's assessment that there is adequate route of escape.
Well, that is set out in the addendum. If you've read the response, have you read the addendum?
Well, the HSC have responded in the addendum, have they?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, right.
So if you could answer the second question then, James.
So on the health and safety executive comments, they commented in regard to the ancillary accommodation, so the bike stores opening out onto the lobby area there, and they consider that this is the only escape route out of the building, and that the ancillary accommodation shouldn't open out onto this lobby. However, in fact, there is separate exits for the 2 ground floor units from the building. So actual integral exits that are built into the ground floor plans. So those are the doors that are built in, external doors there. And in terms of the upper floor flats, there's a fire escape door just to the side of the staircase there. So that the residents of the upper floor flats wouldn't have to actually enter the lobby. They could just leave via that fire escape door at the bottom of the staircase.
Just worth adding to that then since that plan that's on screen, the plan in your addendum pack has had another fire door added to separate further that ancillary accommodation from that fire escape, which gives the ground floor flats another means of escape through the shared area. So I think possibly the HSE hadn't picked up on those direct escape doors from those flats, but that gives it another separation and another means of escape for them. So we're satisfied that it meets what they are seeking to achieve.
So in the addendum where it says the HSE is not satisfied, that is still their latest.
Yes, yeah, we haven't been able to satisfy them, but in terms of what's safe, we're satisfied that the concern that they raise isn't valid. That there is a separate means of escape out, and it's separated from that cycling accommodation. There is obviously building regs approval to go through afterwards. Building control have said that they're satisfied with it, and you could open the cycle door and access that from the externally, but that compromises the use of a bike store because people have to go further. So we feel it's an acceptable compromise to allow that access onto the shared lobby that helps people access their bikes better while having two fire doors that we believe satisfy the concern.
Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you. So as there are no speakers, we'll move to questions. Do members have any questions for the applicant? Right. Okay. So Councillor Bevan and sorry, I missed. Was that your hand as well? So Councillor Bevan first.
Well, I just want to congratulate the applicants on that picture that they had up with the 3 changes in the design as it went through the quality review process, and I think that was quite revealing because the final result was a vast improvement on that first ugly looking construction basically, so well done. And then I wanted to ask about living roofs and their service charge and how long they last. Does someone have to get up there every 3 months and do something, or how does it work?
Okay, well, we'll note the congratulations. Thank you for that, Councillor Bevan. If you can address the green roof.
Jack Gould, Senior Project Manager in the Housing Delivery Team. No, the green roofs are self-sustaining. They do require occasional maintenance, but that's biannual, generally, as long as they're self-sustaining in the correct way. So no, there's no need to get up there on a regular basis, and safe access is provided as part of the building control measures for the scheme.
Go on then, Councillor Rice.
In the year that they're refurbished and looked at, is there charge raised to the tenants for that?
Service charges, as I understand it, are set at a particular level across the borough. So irrespective of the facilities or amenities that are provided in individual blocks, there's no variation in service charges for individual residents. And certainly there'll be no implication to the service charges for existing residents on the estate or for the new tenants coming hopefully into this building.
Councillor Corley-Harris.
Well, just to show how design is subjective, I understand the asymmetric nature. I congratulate the layout. Absolutely. What I can't get my head around is the two-tone nature of it, which I find incredibly congruous, and why it wasn't designed in a far more consistent manner that made it feel like it was one block rather than these 3 large blocks that remind me of a similar design pattern along Tottenham Hale with the red and yellow. So what led to the red and yellow design choice, because that really does stand out for me and makes it feel much bigger than I think it actually is versus the neighbouring property.
Evening Committee, Martin Cowie, Planning Advisor to the Housing Delivery Team. Remember, what you're seeing there is an indicative visual. The materiality is subject to a condition. We've put forward a different range of sort of materials to represent the different sort of elements of the scheme. The 3 different elements essentially, and that was just to simply sort of demarcate those elements and break the sort of overall scale of the block. Sort of argue as you have that sort of represents a sort of a larger mass. We would sort of say that actually by differentiating the materials of each element, you break it down. We've had extensive discussions about this with your planning officers, and I think the feeling was that actually sort of the materials should be different for each element, just to break it down. Now, whether you feel that we feel in due course that for example, the redder brickwork, the darker block at the top, the higher block is sort of a little so overbearing, overwhelming because it's darker, and it perhaps should be lighter as you move up a building, then it's a fair point. And it's something sort of, we will continue to consider as a team with your planning colleagues and with Mr. Truscott.
Okay, thank you. But just to say, I actually quite like the colours of the buildings. So I think that's obviously individual preferences, but I do like them. So any other questions? No? Okay, all right, thank you. So we'll now move to the recommendation. And so thank you for the applicant and to yourself as well, Maurice. Thank you. And we'll now move to the recommendation, and I would like to ask Robbie McKnocker to confirm the recommendation with a summary of any changes, please.
Thank you, Chair. So recommendation is as set out in the report and the addendum, and to include an additional condition controlling the use of satellite dishes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so the recommendation is to grant. All those in favour, please show.
Every hand, that is unanimous.
Okay, that's unanimous. No abstentions? No. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone. Okay, thank you, everyone. So we'll now move on to item 9. That is Cross House, 7 Cross Lane, N8 7SA, pages 127 to 246. So the proposal, which is set out in the pack, I won't read that out, that's in the pack, and the recommendation is to grant. So I will hand over to the planning officer, Valerie, okay, and Valerie's going to introduce the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The proposal is for the demolition of the existing buildings and redevelopment of the sites to provide business Class C G3 light industrial use at the ground, first and second floors and residential use on the upper floors within a building of 6 stories plus basement, provision of 6 car parking spaces and refuge storage. This slide is the site location plan with the site highlighted in red. This slide shows an aerial view of the site highlighted in red, looking north and west. And to the west of the site is Smithfield Square, ranging from 4 to 8 stories in height. New River Village to the east and north of the site, ranging from 3 to 8 stories, and immediately north of the site is Smithfield Yard, which ranges from 5 to 7 stories in height. And immediately south is the Paul Motor site, which recently received planning permission for a 5 and 6 story development. And further south is Hornsey High Street. The site where the black arrow is located adjoins the Hornsey Waterworks and Filter Bed Conservation Area to the south and east. The listed buildings fronting the High Street to the south of the site are highlighted in blue, and the locally listed buildings are highlighted in red. The site forms part of site allocation SA47, which seeks employment-led mixed-use development with residential uses. And to the right is the site allocation plan, which includes the Cross House site highlighted in blue, which is the final phase of this site allocation to come forward for development. And Smithfield Yard, highlighted in yellow, was the first phase that came forward, and the Paul Motor site, highlighted in pink, was the second phase that recently received planning permission. The site is a 2-story brick building with outdated internal facilities and the inability to adapt to changing commercial needs. And this building fills the majority of the site, and it is currently occupied by Palm Recording Studios. And there is currently an area for parking to the south. The proposal is for a 6-story building, including basement level. 9 residential flats are proposed, which comprise of 2 1-bed, 5 2-bed and 2 3-bed flats, and 815 square metres of employment floor space, 6 car parking spaces for the commercial component, car-free for the residential component, 1 blue badge space, and commercial and residential cycle parking spaces, and private amenity and landscaping. The considerations include principle of the development, quality of accommodation, quality design, scale, heritage impact, landscaping, impact on amenity, transport, and sustainability. This slide shows the proposed basement floor plan, which is accessed via a ramp, stairs, and lift. This level includes 6 car parking spaces for the commercial component, which includes 1 disabled parking bay, and separate commercial and residential bike store, and a plant room is also proposed at this level. This is the proposed ground floor plan with a meeting space at the front of the building, and commercial unit to the rear that can be self-contained. And the commercial entrance has a projecting frontage, while the residential entrance is set back and less prominent. Access to the commercial and residential units on the upper floor is via a lift and staircase, and separate bin stores are located behind the designated delivery loading bay to the front. And visitor cycle parking for 4 bikes is located next to this bay. And currently the existing building occupies the entire site. And stepping the building back from the curb edge of the frontage enables 3 trees to be planted and permeable paving. And to the rear is a terrace with planters and a visual link with the central courtyard space of Smithfield Yard and the recent planning permission at the Paul Motos site. I will now focus on one of the key issues. In terms of employment for the scheme, 815 square metres of commercial floor space over ground, first and second floor level is proposed. And there will be no net loss of employment floor space. The existing tenants of the current building intends to use the newly created employment floor space as a recording studio, which is the current use. And marketing evidence demonstrates that there is currently a high demand for flexible commercial spaces to be used as offices, studios, and light industrial purposes in the area. And the employment floor space has been designed to attract a high level of interest from potential occupiers, in that the space has been designed to maximise the efficiency and usability of the space and is easily adapted to allow for more than one commercial unit. And the proposed employment floor space will support the same number of jobs whilst allowing the site area to be utilised more intensively. And the replacement floor space will provide a valuable contribution to the employment floor space stock in the borough, and the scheme will result in local labour training initiatives. This slide demonstrates how the employment floor space on the second floor could be occupied by a single occupant. This slide demonstrates how the employment floor space can be occupied by multiple occupants. This is a typical layout of the residential units. The residential units will be provided on the 3rd, 4th and 5th floor, and they're stacked as 3 units per floor. And each flat has private amenity space in the form of a balcony. And the flats are single aspect, either west or east facing, and there are no north facing single aspect units. This slide is the proposed roof plan, and an extensive green roof is proposed at roof level and above the bin store. This slide shows the proposed street elevation, which includes the Paul Motos development to the right as built, and Smithfield Yard development to the left. The height of 6 stories, which includes a recessed top floor, matches its neighbours. The building steps down from the Smithfield Yard site to follow the site's sloping topography. This slide shows a close-up of the design details. The new building will be predominantly faced in brick with stonework, ceramic cladding and contrasting detailing. The projecting base at ground floor with its tall parapet to the 1st floor roof terrace is finished in a stock brick with glazed white stripes to reflect the adjoining sites. And the scheme has been through pre-application discussions with officers and the quality review panel on 1 occasion. These are 3D images of the site within its context, taken from different views, with the approved Paul Motos development shown as built. And note how the proposed scheme comprises of a single building, whereas the 2 neighbouring sites on either side, the approved Paul Motos development and Smithfield Yard, are designed with a second parallel block with a large communal landscape courtyard. And this slide shows another 3D image. In terms of the heritage impact, the scheme has been through significant conservation and design advice, which has been rigorous, and the scheme has been tested in a number of views requested by officers. And the proposed development would preserve the character and appearance of the conservation area and would respect the setting of the nearby listed buildings. And the proposal would enhance the quality of the conservation area along Cross Lane. And in terms of impact on amenity, there would be no material impact on amenity of nearby residents in regard of loss of outlook or privacy, and no significant detrimental impact on the amenity of nearby residents in regards to daylight and sunlight. This slide shows the separation distances between the proposed building and other existing or consented blocks are in the region of 18 to 20 metres, which in an urban context is acceptable. And in terms of transport and parking, the PTEL is 3 medium and the site is in close proximity to PTEL 5, which is very good. And the scheme is a car-free development for the residential component, and 6 car parking spaces, including 1 blue badge space, is proposed for the commercial component, and 29 cycle parking spaces are proposed overall for the residential and commercial component, which also includes 4 visitor cycle parking spaces for visitors and a dedicated loading bay at the front forecourt. This is the Section 106 head of terms. Officers recommend the committee resolve to grant planning permission subject to conditions and planning obligations as set out in the committee report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Valerie. So do members have any clarification questions to the planning officer? Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple of questions. So first of all, on the matter of aspect, there was just a little bit confused by a couple of things that it says in the papers in paragraph 6.5.3. At the top of page 161, it says the flats which are single aspect are either east or west facing single aspect or dual aspect, which doesn't seem to make sense to me. I don't know if I'm missing something. And then on the following page in 6.5.11, it says the majority of units will benefit from either dual aspect or an east or west facing single aspect. But I gathered from what you said that they were all single aspects. So could you just clarify that? And I've got another question following that, but maybe I'll just let you answer that first.
Right, to clarify the aspects, so this has actually been corrected in the addendum. So the addendum, which has been amended, reads, the flats which are single aspect are either east or west facing, and there are no north facing single aspect flats proposed. So there's no dual aspect. So yeah, so that has been corrected.
Okay, apologies for not having fully digested the addendum. Thanks for that. My other question was just a bit of clarity on policy DM13, because it says in 6.2.21, it talks about sites with the capacity to deliver more than 10 units. And then it says that because the proposal on this site is for only 9 units, that the affordable housing payment doesn't apply. But it then goes on to say if some of this employment space is converted to residential, which kind of implies therefore that the site does, and this proposal does have the capacity to deliver 10 or more units. So just some clarity on how that policy works, please, would be helpful. Thanks.
Yes, Councillor, excellent question. So I think it is clear from looking at the other blocks that have been delivered there that this site does have capacity to deliver more residential. So members have to be mindful of that. There is also the site allocation and the employment policies, which that would create a tension with if you were to ask for a completely residential block here. You'd be falling foul of those other policies. So we feel this finds an acceptable balance that squares those off against each other. There's been a slight under delivery of employment on some of the other sites. So this would bring the whole site allocation for commercial through in this planning permission. Yes, just to avoid missing out on affordable, should those be converted, we've put a sort of safety net of that obligation. So there are competing policies here, but the applicant has proposed to replace the existing commercial floor space that complies with the M38, meets the site allocation, has a slight tension with the M13, but we find that this is acceptable and included that. Really, I think some of the intention of the M13 is that you don't provide 6 very large houses rather than 12 smaller flats. So that's really what it's aiming for. But it equally does apply here where there's commercial space.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you. Let me be clear on this proposal. Could you be clear that it doesn't give any units of affordable housing on the site? Is that right?
That's correct. Yes, yeah.
Because that's right, why is the situation when we've got a long-standing agreement in this committee that we must at least have 10 units to give affordable housing to people? Why bring forward this proposal without adequate affordable housing?
So, as I was explaining, we feel that it's fair to provide a greater proportion of commercial in this case because that satisfies other policies. It does go slightly against that affordable housing policy, but the proposal in front of us is for this larger commercial proposal, and that has been found to be acceptable.
Is it acceptable that the committee should sanction what you said when you have a long outstanding agreement that there should be affordable housing on every possible development because of our housing difficulties here in Haringey, and this does nothing to help it?
Go on. Just explain again what you said previously.
Yes. So, so to be clear, the requirement for affordable housing only would kick in once you reach 10 units. So there are only 9, so that doesn't apply. So, you could find that you believe there to be an under provision of housing, and take a different view to what we have. But officers' view is that if you've got employment policies and a site allocation that require the provision of commercial, and that compliance with those is acceptable in this instance, and the delivery of 9 units, which does provide housing, is acceptable. I think probably also worth bearing in mind, that 10th unit wouldn't enable you to provide affordable housing on site. There wouldn't be a sufficient quantum for someone to manage. If you took it to into the early teens, again, we don't often see those on site. So if the applicant were to seek to convert those later on, we would have that payment in lieu, which would probably be what you would get anyway if this was a completely residential or a large proportion of residential. So in our view, that there's nothing you're missing out on here. It meets employment policies and site allocation policies, and has that slight tension with that affordable housing policy.
We are missing an affordable, and we're going against our policy, right? We are.
If I mean, the issue, it seems to me, is that there will be large commercial units, which is needed in the borough and is providing workspace. So if there were any more any more houses, there would be less commercial units. So that's in a sense what we are balancing up.
And
Okay.
sorry, I just
Thank
thought
you,
I'll
Valerie. Go
say
on.
this as
Yeah,
well.
thank you.
It's also the tenants also intend on occupying the development once it's completed. So at the moment, the existing floor space is 814 square meters, which the existing tenant currently occupies, and the proposed employment floor space will be 815 square meters, and it is their intention to occupy that space once the development has been built.
Could you explain to the prospective tenant what the planning committee policy was on issues such as this?
We did raise this point. We've asked why they've chosen to seek a greater proportion of commercial space, and their response was that they want to accommodate their existing tenant and re-provide the floor space.
Okay, thank you. So are there any more questions of clarification? Councillor Corley Harrison.
Thanks. On the 106 that would recoup money if it were to be converted, it feels like that's just talking about the commercial space. So does that also apply if one of the 3 beds was split up, for example? And if not, can that be tightened up? And also there was a note that actually the design put forward would not provide sufficient daylight in the commercial spaces for them to be converted anyway. So I'd like an answer to that and why that wasn't put in by condition that they couldn't be converted, because I think that was a recommendation. On the single aspect element to it, again, we tend to look unfavourably on single aspects. I appreciate they're east-west, but again, was that not a factor which made this application, on top of the fact that it's perhaps not maximising the density in the area? I mean, you say we would lose commercial floor space, not if it went up by a storey. We wouldn't. It can go up by a storey. There's 8 stories in the area. Was that not considered? But we have these units which are single facing. We have perhaps not a maximised space in the area. The commercial space doesn't have sufficient daylight for them to be residential anyway. Presumably there's different limits on the commercial, and there's no play space on site. There's no green space on site. I'm struggling with this application. So perhaps if you could just come back perhaps on the technicality points there with regards to the 106 and conversion, and then the daylight within the commercial space, please.
Could somebody come in about the green space? Because I think on the visit on Friday, that was explained to us. So if someone can come in and about that, thank you.
Shall I take affordable housing first? So yeah, we'd said we're 10, I should say 10 or more units are provided by future change of use, but I think we could tighten that up just to make that clear, that it's in any circumstance that that threshold of 10 is reached.
Hi, yes, can I take the various other issues? So yes, it's as Val has explained, as the case officer explained, it's replacing the existing commercial floor space plus adding 9 flats. So it's below the 10-unit threshold to provide children's play space and so on. All the flats get generous external private amenity space, and it's not far from local parks, but it's a small development, and it's not really big enough to justify, and policy doesn't require that it has its own private children's play space or its own private shared communal landscape space. It's only 9 flats, effectively, this development, 9 flats plus replacing the existing commercial space. And I think it's a good thing that there isn't sufficient daylight in the commercial units to allow them to work as residential units, because we don't want the commercial units to be converted to residential, do we? We want the commercial units to be retained as commercial units. So in that sense, it's one of the reasons why it's a good development in a rounded sense of the thing. On the single aspect issue, I think it's better than it sounds, than it's been made to sound so far. if I'm at the risk of sounding like I disagree with the case officer. Because I think that, I mean, there are 3 flats per floor on the 3 residential floors. And one of those flats is a through flat. It has east and west aspect. So that is a proper bona fide dual aspect flat. The other 2 flats, one is at the front and faces west, and the other is at the back and faces east. And in both those cases, they also have a small kitchen window, which looks onto the sort of light well area beside the staircase in the middle of the plot, which is also onto that narrow slot of land between open land, landscape land, between the site and the building that's being built at the Poole Motors site. So they effectively get a little glimpse of a secondary aspect, as well as being east or west facing. So I think it generally has quite good aspect. And they all have external balconies. You get to the, you can look up and down the street or up and down the courtyard from those external balconies. I think they'll have good daylight, good sunlight, good living conditions for self-contained flats in a relatively small development.
Is it worth just touching on why it could be a story taller? There are listed buildings in its setting. Do you want to say anything more on that?
Yes, sure. That's a good point as well. Yes. I mean, I think it's really good that it matches the height of the 2 neighbouring developments. So you get this fairly consistent height along the east side of Cross Lane. And it's worth pointing out that there's a row of listed buildings, listed and locally listed buildings along Hornsey High Street, and which is quite a wide street. And then on the south side of Hornsey High Street, you've got the old Hornsey Churchyard, which is a nice little landscape park. And for the Poole Motors site, they had to do a very careful study of views, scientifically assessed views, to make sure that their development would not be oppressively visible, not rise up above the roof of those those listed and locally listed buildings, which they successfully did by restricting it to 5 and 6 stories. And these applicants have replicated the key ones of those views for this site and have shown that theirs also does not appear in those key views of the listed buildings on Hornsey High Street. I think it's really important that they don't.
Did you want to add anything? No, that's fine. Okay. All right, Councillor Rice, just this one last question. I am, yes.
No, I just want to be clear. Is the family house, family flat on this three bed flat, is there? Is that right?
2 family units are proposed. So 2 3-bed units are proposed.
2 3-bedrooms.
Yes.
Are they single aspect?
They're all single aspect, east or west facing, as Richard mentioned.
The design officer didn't agree with you. He's shaking his head. Vigorously.
No, Val, you're wrong. Sorry. With respect, the 2 3-bed flats are 2 of the 3 dual aspect flats.
Say that again.
We're doing lots of different applications at the moment, you know. But there are 3 dual aspect flats in this development with east and west facing aspect. Yes. And 2 of those 3 dual aspect flats are the 2 3-bed flats.
Or one of the 3-bed single aspect.
No, there are only 2 3-bed flats. The other dual aspect flat is a 2-bed flat.
Okay, thank you. So any more questions? No? Okay, thank you. So we'll now move on to the objectors, and Karen, would you like to come up to the microphone, Karen? Thank you for coming, and you have 3 minutes to address the committee.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I live opposite Cross House in Smithfield Square, and I'm very worried about the overlooking. I'm directly opposite the building. At the moment, I have space like air above it, and it's going to have 6 stories there. So I don't see how the overlooking can't be a problem for Smithfield Square residents. Also, it will block more of the light and the sun, also to the lower levels of the street. I'm concerned that you're going to have 2 sides with just buildings. And I'm just wondering, is there any scope to set it back just a little bit, given that there's 18, 20 metres at the back before there's any other buildings? Just a couple of metres might just let a little bit more sun in. I'm just thinking it would make it more an interesting little side road instead of just a dark back street. And cold as well, you know, wind tunnel down there with the buildings. Okay. And then a small thing, the Juliet balconies are missing on the second floor from some of the windows. If they could go all the way across, then I wouldn't feel like people are looking down in. That might give a little bit more privacy. I support the single level plinth. And I should say I support the whole thing, really. It's a lovely looking building. It's better than what's there. Yeah, I'm just wondering if there is any scope to move it back. The noise issues, the recording studio is obviously very successful. They work around the clock. They're there till 2 in the morning. They often come out, they sit on the stairs and they talk. So I'm glad you're designing that out of it. The stairs are gone, but I'm very worried about the terrace because you've got 18 employees in there. So it would be more than residential usage. There's a terrace next door, but that's residential usage, not commercial. So I'm worried either they could come out there at 2 in the morning, like they do several times a week, and it's right opposite all the bedrooms in Smithfield Square. I know they're planting trees and that's welcome, but if we move it back a little bit, would there be more room to plant more greenery? Because the street is very concrete at the moment, and this will just add more to it. Or is there an option to move the parapet up higher? I know it's been moved already, but I know planning says in the papers that they're not comfortable that the plinth gives enough of an architectural feature. So maybe putting that higher, making it more of a feature, that could help with the noise between residents opposite and solve that problem as well. I don't know. And the car park is there 3 minutes?
Okay. About the car park quickly.
Just it's opposite the bedrooms, 2 stacks of bedrooms, and I'm just, because of their hours, they come out at 2 in the morning regularly. I'm just wondering if it's going to be sort of any provisions made for it being silent. I'm not opposing everything. I'm just wondering if there's any way to deal with the noise.
Okay.
Overlooking.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. Just switch off your microphone a moment. So do the members have any questions? No. Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Just take a seat back there. Thank you very much. We now have the applicant and the supporters. They can address the committee. Yeah, just sit over there, please. Is it, so it's Paul Osborne, Nick Macassis? Just Paul Osborne. Okay, all right. So you've got 3 minutes, please.
Thanks for your time. I think Valerie covered most of the description of the development pretty thoroughly, so I'll probably use this to try and address some of the concerns that were brought up. I think Richard touched on it as well, that in our design access statement for this application, we quite clearly illustrated the aspect of all the units, and that technically we would consider them dual aspect. So all units, all residential units be dual aspect, even if on 6 of them it's a relatively small window at the back of each unit, but that does provide cross ventilation at the very least. So across the living space, kitchen diner of each unit, you can open a window at the front and the back, so you can get rid of smells, heat, etc. So we have from the beginning aimed to incorporate that as a feature. So I just wanted to make sure that was fully understood. I mean, in terms of the height and the massing and the building line, we were very much kind of, I suppose, in some ways restricted almost by the applications either side of us. So they have very clearly defined a set building line in terms of the step back from the street at street level and above. And so on the front of the building, we align directly with the site next door, Smithfield Yard, and the Paul Motors sites, both at ground level and the first floor and above. So it's not, you know, imposing itself anymore. And the existing cross house building actually projects the further 3 meters into the road. So if you walk down Cross Lane at the moment, you will see the existing building jutting out quite clearly, and that will be stepped back, providing the opening for providing trees and landscaping on that street. So in that sense, it is a, you know, quite tangible improvement to the street scene. In terms of height, again, we've got a building that's about 750 mil higher on one side and another building 750, well, I think 2 meters lower on the right hand side. So we're sat exactly in between them. So in terms of height, we're not trying to push up any higher than the surroundings. And if we took a story off or something, we would create a kind of a tooth gap site. So in terms of streetscape, it's very legibly and logically set out to follow the context either side. At the back of the site, again, we've got a building line that's slightly different either side of us, and our site transitions the steps, so there is a step in the rear building line of our site. In terms of providing amenity space, you'll see the site is quite a restrictive footprint. So once we've aligned with the front and the back of the buildings either side, we have very little space to provide a large communal area as there is on the 2 larger sites either side, where they extend to the full depth of the site allocation, so they can provide a block at the front, a block at the back, and a site in between. We've just got a little bit at the front of that. And we're following the context rather than trying to expand in any particular way. There is the green space of the Waterworks area, 2 minutes around the corner, as well as Alexandra Palace just up the road. So there are quite a lot of good green spaces available to potential future residents. The applicant on this site is a commercial landlord, they're not a developer. So I know there are a lot of questions as to why there's so much commercial floor space. It's simply because our client lets out commercial floor space, so that's what he wanted, the same area, higher quality, lift up and down, level access, covered bike store, covered bins, which the existing building does not have. And he's, you know, got the existing tenants lined up to hopefully come back in when the development is complete. So there is a demand for that space. And indeed, the initial site allocation that we looked at 7 years ago, part of it says it should be employment led, and that's exactly what this scheme is. So that's why it is the way it is. Thank you very much.
That was just bang on time, so thank you, for that. Do members have any questions of the applicant, Councillor Rice?
Thank you. Why was it not possible for this development to include at least one affordable unit? Bearing in mind that our regulation is that if you have 10 units or more, you must include one residential unit. So why was it not possible to include one residential unit?
My understanding of the policy is where you've got a residential development of at least 10 units or more, that then a certain percentage of those units should be affordable. So our development is for 9 residential units. So we never reached the threshold of 10, at which point that policy would apply. The employment space that's provided is to match the existing building to within 1 square metre. So it's replacing like for like. And when we looked at the building, we had additional height left over. So we could have had, 5 metre high ceilings like this on every floor. But we didn't do that because we had a restriction on the height determined by the site side of the side. And we used that to provide residential units. And we've got 9 residential units that provide a mix of different sizes. So we've got 1 beds, 2 beds and 3 beds. Does that answer that query?
I think it did then. Councillor Corley-Harrison, please.
Yeah, I'd just like you to address the objectors' concerns, particularly in relation to noise and the very large terrace on the first floor, whether you have plans outside of the planning application to deal with that going forward. It's a good opportunity for you to deal with those issues, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, looking at that, there are a couple of ways in which the noise potential could be controlled. Obviously, the first one is hours of use. I understand that at the moment they're using it to very late at night. So that's one restriction, is the hours of use of the whole commercial element. So if they're using it till 2 in the morning, that could be restricted in that way. Or it could be, I think I've seen on other applications, external amenity areas being controlled in terms of hours of use, generally on a kind of pub type basis, but I would imagine a similar condition could potentially be applied to this, because we have no intention of, I mean, we can have residents in our own building, so it would not help anyone to have people partying at 2 AM. So yeah, I'd welcome some sensible solution to that.
So, because some of the issues that you raised weren't really planning considerations, although, Councillor Corley-Harrison has picked up on them. So can you, have a conversation, and so that, in terms of the noise and things like that, those concerns are addressed?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we can just look at a condition that deals with the hours of use, or something that can simply be applied, I think that would be in the benefit of everyone's interest.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Corley-Harrison.
Yeah, I think that's probably wise. I think we can have a planning condition on the use of the external amenity space on the commercial units being restricted beyond sort of 10 or 11, whatever standard, without getting other bodies or departments involved. That could be by planning condition.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible thing to include. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Bartlett.
And just following on from that, did you have any response to some of the concerns about the overlooking and so on?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the overlooking, I think it's inevitably the nature of that site, that if you moved kind of 10 metres to the left or the right, it would be the same situation, that the buildings are the same distance apart. It's a narrow road. Currently, yes, there is a gap where the existing cross house is, because it's relatively low scale. But I think planning wise, if that kind of gap remained, it would be odd and unusual. So I think that is something that is not really easily addressed, because if we took out windows from the front of our building, then we would have windowless rooms, or exceptionally deep, long rooms. So I don't think there's a simple, easy way of getting around that.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. So the intention is for this to remain a recording studio with the same tenants as previously. But should that fall through, what's the nature of the commercial space likely to be? And I'm thinking specifically in terms of, like vehicles coming and going and the size of those vehicles.
So the planning use is light industrial, used to be B1C, I think is now EG3. So things like kind of fashion studio type of things, that sort of thing. So it's a use class where it's designed to be compatible with surrounding residential uses. So it won't be kind of, I don't know, a Tesco supermarket or anything like that. And so depending on the business, there might be different varying vehicle movements. But the site is got the same use class at the moment. So if this development didn't happen and the recording studio left, then the same thing would happen.
And just to quickly note, there are some provisional layouts in pages 10 and 11 of the addendum. If you've not seen those, that just show how those layouts would work within this space.
Okay, all right. So are there any other questions? No. Okay, all right. So we'll now move to the recommendation. And I'd like to ask Robbie McNulty to confirm the recommendation with a summary of any changes, please.
There's an error which occurs on 2.3 with Mr. McNulty address that when he gives his summary.
It was that paragraph 2.3, just yes, in terms of the date, yes. So yes, so the addendum is only corrections to the report, but one of those, yes, as you note, is that the recommendation itself is amended to give longer for the Section 106 legal agreement to be complied with, taking that to the 6th of May rather than March. So yes, so recommendation is, as set out in the report, and with that amendment to paragraph 2.3, and also to include a condition limiting the hours of use for the external terrace at the commercial space to no later than 10 o'clock at night. So,
Thank you. Okay, so the recommendation is to grant, and we'll now move to the vote. All those in.
Thank you, Fiona. Yes, and yes, there was also a change to the head of term suggested by Councillor Colley Harrison to say that it was 10 or more units in any circumstance, not just change of use. Thank you.
Councillor Dunstall.
Sorry, just one further question. Part of the complaints was around that noise late at night. I'm guessing it's people smoking or whatever as they're wrapping up. What provisions are in place or can be put in place to, so we put a provision in to say people are not going to go on the balcony and past a certain time, but are they going to be spilling out the front after a certain time? Sounds like that kind of containment bit is kind of part of the issue that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I'm not sure. In terms of people leaving, I'm not sure how that could.
Sorry, can you just wait, Councillor Rice? Could you just quickly answer that question? I have allowed Councillor Dunstall to come in. Thank you.
Sorry, yeah, in terms of what time people leave, again, if there's a condition on the employment hours, that will determine that. I mean, as for the flats, there's nothing, no way of controlling what people do.
Councillor, if you're thinking more widely about those issues, then perhaps rather than just making it specific about that terrace, we could make it a management plan. So that would look at all of those issues and gives us probably a bit more time to think about it more broadly. So yeah, we could specify the time for external space, but could manage various things relating to noise and comings and goings. So we're happy to include that in the recommendation.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I'm thinking specifically.
Okay, thank you. Yeah,
Stuff,
we've got that. Yeah. Right. Okay. So the recommendation is to grant, and we will now move to the vote. So all those in favour, please show.
Eight with yourself, Madam Chair.
All those against?
One against
And any abstentions?
and an abstention.
Okay, all right, thank you. So that's carried. Thank you. Councillor Brennan, I think. So you can sit here now. Right, okay, so we're going to move on quickly. So item 10 are the pre-application briefings, and we're now on to item 11. Okay, so we're on to item 11, which is the pre-application, the Civic Centre High Road, N22 8ZW, that's pages 247 to 272. The proposal is set out in our pack. Planning officer is Samuel Uff, and I'll pass over to Samuel to present this item. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, thanks very much. Thanks, Chair. This proposal is for the refurbishment and renovations to the existing Civic Centre and erection of a 3-storey building in the rear car park. The use would retain the existing civic uses and an expanded contemporary council office function. The existing building was statutorily listed as Grade 2 in 2018. The site is within the Trinity Gardens Conservation Area and is designated as site allocation SA5 in the site allocation as DPD. And WGSA1 of the draft Wood Green Area Action Plan. These policy documents both predate the 2018 statutory listing of the Civic Centre. Both highlight the suitability of redeveloping the car park alongside renovations to the Civic Centre and the proposed uses that are put forward. The scheme has been subject to numerous pre-application meetings and has had 2 well-received discussions with the QRP. A development management forum was held on the 20th of February. The notes of these meetings are set out in the pre-app reports. Officers are generally supportive of the design, scale and matter of the proposed building. The repairs and renovations to the existing listed building are broadly supported as a means of retaining the civic use of the site and creating suitable contemporary office layouts. Members' feedback is sought at this stage to inform the submission of detailed plan application in the coming weeks. I'll now hand over to the developers, representatives who will present the proposal, and they'll be able to answer any questions. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you. Welcome. So you do have 15 minutes to present this.
Hi, my name is James Wells Fleming and I'm Harringay Council's Strategic Lead for Council Accommodation. I'm shortly going to be handing over to Jason Martin from Hawkins Brown, who's our lead designer, but I just wanted to very briefly introduce the scheme from a council perspective. January last year, Cabinet approved a business case for the scheme that we are presenting to you this evening. I won't go into the detail of that business case here, you'd be pleased to know, but I wanted to pull out kind of two key drivers for us why the scheme is so important for us. The Civic Centre, as you all know, has a long and rich history, and we are really keen that it sees even more history. So bringing back that sense of civic pride, bringing back the Civic Centre, back to being the heart of civic democracy in the borough is really, really important for us, as is bringing back that sense of transparency in every sense of the word that the original design of the building had. And we're really keen to increase accessibility and open up as much of the site as possible to the wider public. It's also really key to delivering our accommodation strategy. The scheme will enable us to consolidate our core office accommodation onto a single site and provide modern, flexible workspace for our workforce, which supports how we want to work in the future and also demonstrates our commitment to staff wellbeing. We've done a series of engagement prior to this point, away from the formal planning process. So we've engaged with key local stakeholders, including the two nearest primary schools, the local church and the Traveller site. The schools in particular are really excited by the scheme and the opportunity to get involved. And we're also talking to them about being involved in some co-design elements around particularly some of the external spaces, which Jason will cover later in the presentation. We've done two public engagement events at Wood Green, one at Wood Green Library and one at Trinity Primary School, open to all residents. The results of which will be included as part of our formal application. And we've also engaged with staff and had a series of staff roadshows where they've been able to input into the designs in terms of what they'd like to see in terms of amenity. And then finally, we also have a member forum, which is a cross-party forum that allows that group to see the design progress and also input on key design areas, particularly around the civic use of the building. So we're really excited by this scheme, and I'll now hand over to Jason to run you through the design detail.
Good evening. My name is Jason Martin. I'm partner at Hawkins Brown Architects. Second. So I'm going to give you a very quick, a little bit of background on the site and the heritage. I'm going to talk about the architectural design, particularly looking at the annex. I'm going to talk about the interior design, focusing on the listed interior, and then touch on landscape and sustainability. Presumably you all know the site very well. It is obviously 5 minutes walk from the Wood Green Tube Station, so PTEL rating of 6, good transport links. It has a number of listed buildings in addition to the Civic Centre being listed in the vicinity. There's the Trinity Park School to the west and St Michael's Church to the south, and there's some locally listed assets in the area as well. The Civic Centre itself was listed in 2018. The listing notes qualities of informality, transparency and modernity, which we'd like to enhance and replicate in the new building. It also has some historic interest as the first Civic Centre built after the war. James has touched on it, but in terms of the kind of the brief for the building, we're retaining the civic and democratic functions. There's going to be some shared community space, between the community and the officers of the council, and then there's the larger part of the brief is administrative office space. So looking first at the existing building is in poor condition. It has single glazing. It has some precast panels which are in very poor condition. The brickwork's reasonably good though. So we are looking to retain that existing brickwork, but there will be substantial replacement of the glazing with double glazed units, and then we are proposing to replace the precast panels with a GRC element, which is lighter weight and allows insulation. I'm going to talk now about the Trinity Road building, which is the working title for the annex building. So in terms of the design principles, there are some existing mature trees on Trinity Road. We want to keep those. So the new building is located in a compact plan form at the centre of the car park site. That maximises distance to neighbours. We've adopted a 1950s planning principles, which is a building in a park in keeping with the existing building. The other advantage of this kind of compact form is it's very efficient in terms of its proportion of external envelope to internal space, which is great for energy saving. We've got some connections to the Civic Centre, which I'll talk about a bit more, but that creates a central courtyard. And then in terms of the facade, we're looking at sort of a brise soleil, which varies according to its orientation, and some picture windows. More of that later. So in terms of its massing, it's a 3-storey office building. It has a single additional storey of plant space, which is set back from the parapet. There's a 2-storey link block to the west, and then a bridge connecting the north wing of the Civic Centre to the new building at first floor. Just mentioned this, one of the key aspects of the design is essentially wrapping the building with solar shading, fins and horizontal bands which shade the windows and reduce the energy consumption of the building. At each of the 4 corners, we've got larger picture windows to allow views into the building, but also views out to the surrounding areas. And they're on all 4 corners of the building, including one looking towards Alexandra Palace to the west. The original master plan for the site included an auditorium, large auditorium, and a library. And it was connected to the existing building in the position shown on the photographs there, the purple areas. So we're proposing to reuse those exact same locations for the connections to the new build. And you can see in this image the proposal to create the central courtyard, the 2 link blocks going into the annex design. In terms of material palette, both for the replacement of the precast panels and the new building, we're looking to use GRC, which replicates that original precast material. It's a stone-like material. You can get it in a variety of colours and textures, but it's very thin, which means that it can be lightweight and it's lower energy in construction. And then we've got some CGIs. You've seen this one already. This is the view from the northeast, from the high road. And then this is a kind of closer up view looking at the link block, the connection to the north wing with the gate underneath it. There's a fence underneath the link block, which creates that sort of privacy for the internal courtyard. Bike storage in this vicinity is under development. So looking now at the inside of the building, so these diagrams represent the floor plans. So the top left is the ground floor. You see we're proposing to reuse the main entrance, the existing main entrance as the main entrance for the building. You'll go into the 3-storey existing lobby area. Behind that is a welcome space. The old registrar space, which was to the left of that lobby, is the shared space shared with the community. Democratic uses at first and second floor, and then much of the additional floor space is administrative office space. Just waiting for the slide to catch up. So I'm going to give you a tour of the building now very quickly. Oops. Sorry, beg your pardon. So this is the existing lobby space. It's one of the high significant spaces within the building. And in all of these spaces, we're proposing to refurbish the existing finishes and then just upgrade in terms of furniture and lighting, AV, MEP, etc. So this is the lobby space. In the background there, you'll see the undercroft space. So this is the external space currently underneath the committee wing. The proposal there is to put glazed walls down either side to create this shared space for welcoming visitors. We'll be looking in the council chamber to sort of bring it back up to modern standards, but respecting the existing finishes which are there. Committee rooms, a similar story, and the mayor's suite. And then the shared space, so the old registrar space. All of these CGIs are in progress to a degree. We're working through the interior finishes, but this space gives the opportunity for something to be shared with the community, and it will break out to one of the external spaces I'm about to talk about. Second. There we go. So the north wing of the office is one area where we're doing more significant change to the interior of the building. So as you're probably aware, it's a largely cellular space in that space at the moment, so lots of partitions and a central corridor. The proposal is to remove those partitions generally and just retain a few of the higher quality office spaces, but create an open plan environment. Now that is subject to some ongoing discussions with the conservation, the design officer, in terms of trying to retain a memory of that central corridor. Very quickly now, landscape. So this is the master plan. I'm going to start at the top right. That's the service yard area, which is adjacent to the Trinity School, with some bike stores in that area. Then moving down Trinity Road. What I should say about the entire approach to the site is it will be a permeable boundary, so the public will be able to move onto the site, and the secure line will be at the perimeter of the building. So that gives us the opportunity to actually to kind of make it to give amenity back to the community. So on Trinity Road, we have play on the way suggested underneath the large trees. There will be access to the underside of the cedar tree, a sort of a quieter space. We're improving the quality of the landscaping at the front of the building. There will be 8 car parking spaces at the front of the building. 3 of them are designated as disabled, but the other ones are oversized and could be flexibly used for disabled bays as well. We're creating level access into the building. Then moving round to the top left of this picture, that's the existing quite heavily treed area. So we're referring to it the woodland garden, and that's going to be the subject of some co-design with local schools and community groups. The one area which is has a degree of privacy is the central courtyard, which is enclosed for use by staff and invited guests. It could also be on occasion used for events. And then just to sort of pick up on the cycle parking, there is, I think, around about 130 spaces of covered spaces. The larger proportion of them will be to the within the service yard to the west at the top of the page, and then there are some additional ones adjacent to. Actually, I didn't mention it on the plan previously. There is a suggestion or there's a proposal to put forward a staff entrance underneath the link connecting the north wing to the Trinity building. So there'll be some additional covered cycle spaces adjacent to that entrance, and then visitor cycle parking at the front of the building. Last slides then, sustainability. I won't go into a huge amount of detail here, but we're meeting with the Net Zero London Plan targets. We're actually going above that and achieving the UK Green Building Council net zero operational targets 2025. So what that means in terms of energy targets is we've tested the model under TM54 calculations, and we're looking to substantially improve on those 2025-2030 climate challenge and UK Green Building Council targets. We've got 20% or in excess of 20% renewable generation on site. And then we're going above and beyond in terms of the Part L minimum requirements under planning legislation, quite substantially better. And then final thing is the embodied carbon of the building. We are testing all of our decisions within. We have software to calculate the embodied carbon, the amount of carbon that's generated in constructing the building. We have a target of the REBA 2025 target, which is the dotted line on this graph at the top. That's for the campus. The Civic Centre itself is well below that because we're making use of the existing building. At stage 2, we were very slightly above for the Trinity building. We're working on that. We're just updating those figures for stage 3. We believe we're going to bring it down marginally so that the new building will also achieve that. But the good news is overall, the project seen as a whole is substantially below the target. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. So are there any questions or comments from the committee? Councillor White.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so just on the accessibility and transparency and those other things that were at the heart of the original design, which in the 50s, which were never actually fully realised, and it's really good to see those being brought back and hopefully will be more fully realised. I just wondered, as a member of the public, so not a councillor and not somebody who's got a meeting at this civic centre, but just somebody who's heard about this new building that's been built. That's the civic centre of Haringey. I'm walking there, and I walk past, and I'm wondering where can I actually go in there without having business there, and what can I do? That's I'd like to know. Thanks.
Well, you would be able to access the external landscape is probably the key publicly accessible point. But you could get into the lobby space, and then, as I was mentioning, the registrar area will be a shared space that is available for hire and events for the community. Don't know if you want to add to that, James.
Yeah, so aside from the external area, as Jason has said, so the main reception won't be the secure line to the building, and so coming off the street, there's nothing to stop you from walking into the reception area. There'll be a reception desk there. We're looking to move to more of a kind of a host meet and greet model rather than a kind of a security guard provision, although there'll still be security across the building. The welcome area that sits immediately behind the reception, I don't know if we can bring up the picture very quickly, will be in sort of an informal seating area. And in theory, there's no reason why someone can't come off the street and access that area. Clearly, we would need to work with FM and security colleagues about how we want to manage that space. But primarily in terms of sort of readily available public amenity, it's the outside area, particularly that woodland area, which we're looking to bring back in sort of full public use.
Thanks. So I suppose I'd just like to say that sounds a little bit like it's a bit of a missed opportunity, because that's certainly whenever I've been asked my opinion, I've always said, and including when I was a member of cabinet a couple of years ago, I've said I was hoping that where we would get to was a kind of we would have uses. People would be able to go there maybe to have a coffee or have a meal, or there are certainly examples elsewhere in the world or elsewhere in the history where you've had civic uses and theatre or concert halls or something like that. I'm not suggesting that we've got space there for those uses, but that we should be really, if we really want to be transparent and we really want to be accessible, then the place where the council does its business not only needs to be transparent, but also we need to be mingling with people while we're doing that business as much as we can. Of course, I understand that security is important, but I just feel like it's a bit of a missed opportunity to have those mixed uses.
So I'm happy to come back to one more time on that. So I think that's an absolutely fair comment. I think perhaps my answer was probably more geared towards kind of core office hours. Clearly, during things like committee nights for council, there's the absolute opportunity to have that welcome area be in effect the broader reception space. The question you asked was primarily about someone walking in off the street. In a more managed situation, the registrar's wing, the welcome space, and the external areas are absolutely designed to be flexible and open in a way that if you wanted to have a community event that used the registrar wing large meeting spaces, for example, in some external area, that is absolutely the design intent of the building. So I think that there's a distinction between managed access for the community and public versus someone just walking kind of ad hoc off the street into the space. So the former is absolutely as part of the design intent and part of the management of the building. The latter is a slightly harder thing to manage just because it's harder to kind of manage the kind of security aspects of it.
Councillor Corley-Harris.
Thanks. Two questions. If you exclude, the chamber or whatever, what's the square footage that this is providing in terms of office space? Hold that thought. And the second one is, this is grade 2 listed. We have a walking and cycling action plan, all about reducing car use. We're making this nice courtyard in the middle. You look at the Civic, and the first thing you see is a car park outside the front, which is ugly in its current form, and you seem to have retained. So is there any scope for doing away with the car park out the front, making that a really nice pedestrianised area, potentially extending the pavement right into the red line? And then obviously you have Trinity Road that does have provision for, I think, converting some of the spaces there into the disabled spaces we know that we would use, or we use the car park that's more on the Bounds Green Road side. I think as it stands, that's a real missed opportunity at the front of the building.
Yeah, I wonder whether the kind of the plan is sort of misleading, because the intention is very much that this is a pedestrianised area. So the cars will only access this space from Trinity Road is the current suggestion. So that small sort of entrance at the bottom right of this plan. So yes, there is at a degree of car parking space there, but car parking space does, particularly for disabled people, has to be within a certain maximum distance of the main entrance. But what we would say is that the area immediately outside the main entrance of the building and the area immediately outside the old registrar and the council chamber above is pedestrianised. And that is its appearance, and it's going to be improved dramatically. I agree with you. At the moment, the box junction, which is immediately outside, is not a good feature, and that's something that we're looking to remove.
And the square footage?
So it is 600 square meters, 6,000 square meters NIA, and it's 11,000 gross external area. Of that 6,000 square meters, I don't know off the top of my head exactly what the proportional split is between the administrative space and the other. I'd have to get back to you on that, but it's.
Councillor Rice.
The west side of the Civic Centre, in the evening, gets extremely hot, particularly in the summer. What are you going to be doing to eliminate that? And you talk about landscaping. Could it not be provided a memorial garden for people being around the Civic and these activities over a number of years, including members of the public?
If I could take the first point. So the building will be, the first step is we're improving the external envelope. So all of the glazing is going to be really significantly upgraded, which will help in terms of the solar gain that goes into the building. So we've got much higher performance glass now. But the other thing is the entire building is going to be mechanically ventilated as well, which is going to greatly increase the internal comfort. Pretty much the entire, or a very large proportion of the basement is now given over to mechanical plant, and we're reusing the existing void spaces because places such as the council chamber did have mechanical ventilation from day one. It just didn't work particularly effectively, whereas we'll be improving those systems now.
So I'll answer that. So we're aware that across the site there are a number of memorial elements, including some trees planted to the rear of the site, and also some plaques and signage within the reception. We will be looking to retain all of that. If any of it needs to be relocated for any reason, we'll engage, including with the member forum, actually, about how we re-provide that memorial element within the main building. We're looking at elements in the reception area, for example, as an opportunity to capture some of those memorial elements.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, just a small point first of all. I hope all the committee rooms will be properly equipped with screens. I mean, that screen size is excellent. We don't want to get into it and then find we have to start moving and rolling screens about all over the place. I'm assuming that will be taken into place. And also, will there be any refreshment facilities for staff to make coffee? I mean, River Park House had a commercial cafe operating there. Is that going to be something that's operating here? And then also the parking. So there will be parking for people other than disabled parking. Can you confirm that for me? Because I think that is really essential in certain aspects.
there are a total of 5 parking spaces on the site. 3 are disabled parking spaces and the other 5 are enlarged spaces that could be used either for disabled or for regular visitors.
I have concerns about that because I don't think that's enough, to be quite honest. I mean, this is, you said flexible working. For flexible working, there will be people visiting just for one thing. They might be coming somewhere. They don't all want to get on the tube and walk up to Wood Green. I really have concerns about that.
So I'll come back very briefly on that. So in terms of staff use of the building, from a commuting perspective, we're absolutely clear that this is a car-free site. So we will be expecting staff to use sustainable travel to get to site. We accept that there'll be some staff who need their vehicle to carry out their roles, and there's kind of 2 elements to that. Those services that have sort of fleet vehicles aren't actually relocating to the civics. So parking enforcement officers, for example, won't be based out of the civic site, and so that element of fleet won't be moving to this site. For other staff, social workers, for example, that might need their vehicle to be out of Atton Borough, we will be looking at revising our essential car permit policies, identifying alternative parking locations. But we are quite clear that this site will not have parking for staff, particularly for commuting purposes, and that's part of our commitment around sustainable transport and why we're sort of investing in the sort of larger cycle provision as well.
Yeah, but I wasn't referring to parking for staff. I was referring for visitors who are coming to do business, perhaps from all over London. Then older people, there's many older people who can't get on the tube and come to the Civic Centre for events. I really think, in my opinion, that's gone over the top.
Okay, so I accept that. I think for people who are able to use public transport, the site is very well served. It's got a very high Peter rating, as we sort of covered. I think for events where people might need to come in, I think as part of the kind of the site management plan, people hosting and organising those events will need to look at the measures, whether that be minibus drop-offs. There's drop-off facilities available within that. So if you were in a cab, for example, you'd be able to come in and drop off adjacent to the site. So I think there are ways we can mitigate that. But there'll always be a tension between those that want to travel to the site with cars versus both the available space and the environmental impact of that.
Well, I don't accept your argument, and what the feedback that I'm getting on transport is that there are many people who can't use public transport, older people, and people perhaps coming for business from all over London who are going on to other places. They're going to come by car because they don't want to jump on the tube and work out all their separate journeys. I really think you need to reconsider that aspect. So that's my view.
I appreciate that, and we'll accept that challenge, and we'll continue to work with colleagues in the Highways Department as well about making sure that our transport assessment covers those points. On your other 2 questions about audiovisual equipment in the committee rooms, absolutely yes. All of the meeting spaces within the building will be kitted out with modern AV. Clearly in the heritage spaces that will have to be more sensitively provided, but I certainly don't want to get to a position where we're having to wheel around screens. So there'll be a permanent screen within each of those spaces. And then on your final point about refreshment, so within the office accommodation, there'll be sort of kitchenettes on every floor, so tea, coffee can be made. On the ground floor of the annex building, Trinity Road building, there will be a larger kitchen provision where staff will be able to kind of warm up food and eat in a slightly more communal environment. And then finally, within the welcome space, which is sort of an extension of the new reception space, there'll be a servery counter at the very end of that space. I'm not going to get into whether that'll be a commercially run enterprise or not, but there'll be the opportunity there for that to be run and provide tea, coffee, sandwiches, jacket potatoes. Not a full commercial kitchen, but there is some kitchen storage behind that space. So depending on how we choose to manage the site, there'll be an opportunity for that kind of amenity in that space as well.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Corley-Harris.
Yeah, just a quick point on the window element. The council restored Hornsey Library, which is grade 2 listed actually, a couple of years ago, and they replaced some of the windows there. And the office rooms there get so hot that the blinds are closed all day, and we have the lights on, and that's new windows, and I'm pretty sure they have mechanical ventilation, and they have windows, but they only have slot windows at the top because it's higher up and etc. So perhaps if the team can refer to what went wrong there and make sure that it doesn't happen again here, I'm sure that you'll provision things, but that was a big spend and a big refurb project, and it's still not right there. So no guarantees or anything is what I'm saying, really.
Okay, Councillor Warren.
Thank you. Just a point from the quality review panel's report from their January response about the east-west pedestrian and cycle route, and they weren't convinced it would be well used. Could you just clarify, is that something that you've responded to or expanded on since they made those comments, and what's the plan to make sure it's well used?
Yeah, we have taken steps. So that's the left-hand side of this plan. We have made provision to improve the pedestrian route on the right-hand side of that route past the southern end of the building, the left-hand side of the building, and then where it connects into the woodland garden area, we've improved that connection, and there will be a clear path running through. You can't see it on this plan, unfortunately, but there is a clear path then running through and out onto Bounds Green Road. So yes, we have picked up on that.
Okay, right. So I think that's all the questions and comments. So thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Okay, so we're now on to item 12, which is update on major proposals, pages 273 to 288. This is to note. Any questions to Robbie McLaughlin, Councillor Levy?
There was a lot of questions in my mind, but if I just keep it to 4, I mean, whether you want to answer them now. The police station in Hornsey, what on earth is going on with that? Because that's been ongoing for ages. The Amiga Works, the application's been classed as invalid. So what happened there? And Arundel and Baldwin Court, that's been going on for ages, and so has Osborne Grove. So I'm just wondering, those 4 issues.
Okay, thank you. Hornsey Police Station, there's just been some issues brought up by consultees, such as transport, that we're working through at the moment, and the viability report has been out to assessment. So those sort of matters are being considered before a recommendation is finalised. Omega Works, invalid means that it doesn't have sufficient plans, so that there were some plans or reports, so that there were some reports and details that hadn't been submitted. So we fed that back to the applicant. They're preparing those and will then send those to us shortly, we hope. Osborne Grove, we understand that there's to potentially be some amendments to that. So we're waiting for to review those and progress that. And Arundel and Baldwin Court, the housing team are just looking at the detail of that before they move that forward for further pre-applications and submission.
Councillor Rice.
Lockkeeper's Cottage on Stonebridge Lock area, I believe. What happened about that?
Yes, Councillor, that one was on the list for, I think, almost a year. Well, there was an issue with the land ownership that was to be resolved. So it has now had planning permission. We haven't had any indication of when that will come forward in terms of discharging conditions or anything like that to get it on site. And we haven't heard from the applicant on that. So we're unclear at the moment. There will be a 3-year planning permission on that. So there's probably still the majority of that to run, no less than 2 years anyway.
Okay, thank you. So we're now on to item 13, applications determined under delegated powers, pages 289 to 316. This is to note. Any questions? No. Okay. There are no new items of urgent business, and the date of the next meeting is 24th of April 2023. So I hereby close the meeting and thank you all very much indeed. Thank you.